My father is a logger, specifically one who operates a tree saw, which is basically a giant machine that is capable of cutting down massive trees and cutting them to specified lengths, which means he spends a lot of time alone in the deep forest. The way my dad's logging crew was set up is that he would be told where he was supposed to cut down trees, and he would go do that and be paid based on the amount of trees he cut, not on how long it took him. So my dad used to work 16 to 20-hour days constantly to try and get as much done as quickly as possible, and then the rest of the crew would come clean up the trees and ship them to the mill. He used to work around 50% of the time alone, and the rest of the time with another tree saw operator called Rene. He would use radios to communicate back and forth when they were working together. So anyway, my dad and Rene were put on a new job site, and about 10 days in, everything was going as planned. But they constantly heard weird chitter-chatter over the radio that was such poor quality, no words could be heard, and whatever radio channel they changed it to, it followed them. As they progressed through the job and went further up the mountain, the words from the radio slowly became more audible. Both of them agreed, based on the small parts of conversation that they could hear, that something was wrong. They also started finding weird containers all over the place, and signs that people had been there. People should not have been there, as it was a 2.5-hour drive up a mountain. They had to spend 3 weeks clearing out the road, so their trucks and equipment could make it up. They came to the realization that they are in a very secluded area, with people who shouldn't be there, and the worst part is, they aren't scheduled to leave for about another week. They would only leave to refuel the truck with gasoline for matches, and they would buy supplies and sleep in campers. One day, Rene comes across a tent and calls my dad over. They investigate the tent and find one lone sleeping bag and a duffel bag. They investigate the duffel bag and find many pairs of children's underwear and things that appear to be a rape kit, like rope, duct tape, sketched images of children being molested, and photographs of children that appear unaware that they are being photographed. In the tent, they also find a small amount of food, which includes canned goods, and an apple, which proved that the tent had been occupied recently, because there was no mold on it. They are now alone on a mountain with, at best case scenario, is a really messed up individual. Rene instantly wants to get out of there, but my dad, being the hardest working person I've ever met, insists that they need to finish the job and then leave. They decide that they will not talk over the radios except in case of emergencies, and use it to see if they can hear anyone talking over it. My father and Rene are now in close enough range of whoever has been talking over the radio to hear the conversations between two men about collecting water and wood for the fire. Nothing abnormal, except for the fact that these guys don't belong here, and that the tent is undoubtedly theirs. At the end of the workday, my dad hears them on the radio, talking about one of them collecting brush for a fire. My dad then hops on the radio and attempts to communicate with them about what the hell they are doing. I believe he said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" After this, the conversation between the men abruptly stops and they never pick up. That night, Renee wakes my dad up and whispers for him to get his gun. Someone's outside. My dad has told me that the first thing he hears when he wakes up is the quiet shuffling of footsteps. My dad fumbles for his gun and finds it, but realizes that he doesn't have it loaded and has next to no idea where his rounds are, and Renee has nothing. And the thought of calling the police is absurd for multiple reasons. They hear a jiggle on the doorknob and it opens. The camper is far enough off the ground to where you had to jump in, and there is no ladder or footstool. It just stays open, and neither my dad or Renee move. They hear scratching right outside the door though, and after 4 minutes of scratching, my dad can no longer take it and nods at Renee. He quietly gets up and walks towards the camper door, and the second he reaches it, he is met with an intense pain across his right eye and to the left of his cheek. He has been cut and falls to the camper, hitting the ground hard. A man with a knife gets on top of him, and he is soon being kicked in the top of the head by a man behind him. Renee leaps off the trailer and manages to get the man off my dad, and my dad gets up and realizes that the second man without a knife is running away, and the man with a knife is scrambling away from Renee and starts running alongside his accomplice. My dad and Renee get into the truck and drive to the nearest hospital to treat my dad's cuts, and later report the events to the police. They both quit their jobs, and 2 weeks later, as the rest of the logging crew was finishing up the job, one of them was found gagged, bound, raped, murdered, and thrown into a ditch. No one has been convicted of these crimes. To this day, my father can hardly see out of his right eye, and the pupil is disfigured and looks more like a cat's eye than a human's. He suffers from PTSD and hasn't slept a good night's sleep since.